Okay. All right, good morning, everyone. So what I'd like to do is just to finish up a little piece from that Imrei Yaakov that we were looking at yesterday from later on as far as employer-employee relations, as far as being able to break a contract that you made orally with an employee, with a laborer. And so let me bring that up. We had mentioned in passing that there's an issue when it comes to causing someone a loss of income, that all of the halachos that permit you to back out on a commitment to hire someone or to work for someone, all is stated when there's no financial loss. But if there is financial loss, then you, through your cancellation of work, so then you have to make a compensation on the loss. So without going through this very long piece in the Biurim, which is quite a lengthy piece, I just wanted to read for you the maskana, ula maskanas hadavar, ha'ola mikol hanal. In the Biurim, he says, like to wrap things up, what we end up seeing from all of this, he was talking about specifically where you make an appointment at a doctor's office and then you cancel the appointment. Now, before we go any further, I know we have a couple of doctors in the shir. Typically, there's a sign in the doctor's office that says that you have to cancel. If you're going to cancel an appointment, you have to cancel it within 24 hours. Otherwise, you'll have to pay for the appointment. Is that standard practice? If someone, one of the doctors can confirm, or is it 48 hours? What's the standard? Is there something from the Ontario College of Physicians? Is there anything written there?
So, Rabbi, there's nothing standard, but the typical is 24 hours, but it's very hard to enforce.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Alan. But he says, as far as what would be the halachic principle, let's say one of the members of our shir wants to make an appointment to see Alan, and they have to cancel within 24 hours. And each of them wants to live according to halach, and they want to do what's right. Right? So Alan, on the one hand, wants to do what's right. So he wants to know, halachically, am I allowed to charge that person for the appointment that they canceled? And the patient says, halachically, am I obligated to pay the physician for that last minute cancellation? So the answer would be as follows. First of all, any clinic or doctor's office can make whatever policy it wants as long as it provides disclosure to the patients in advance. So, and as long as the patient is aware of that, then there's nothing wrong with creating any kind of policy which says you hereby agree by making an appointment that if you do have to cancel within 24 hours or 48 hours, that you will pay. And once the patient is disclosed that and they say, I hereby agree, so then they would become obligated based upon their commitment. But let's say there was no such disclosure, there was no such condition created at the outset. He says as follows: Ba'adam shehizmin tor eitzel rofe. Person makes an appointment by the doctor, ubitlo, and then they cancel the appointment. So if the doctor incurred a financial loss as a result, because he had scheduled X number of patients for the day, and now he's got X minus one, so he can't bill for the same amount of patients. So he says as follows: Echad im habitul nasa al yedei ones v'lo hayashayach lahodio merosh vaday patur. So number one, if the need for cancellation was through something that was totally beyond the control of the patient had absolutely no way of knowing that they wouldn't be able to come. Let's say they suffered a loss in the family, so they had to go to the funeral, or let's say their flight was canceled and they got laid over from out of town, and they weren't able to make the appointment because they couldn't get back to town in time. So in those situations, then the patient would be exempt from paying. But Beis, im habitul nasa yedei peshia, v'haya yachol lahodio merosh, v'az haya yachol harofei lahazmin adam acher b'makomo. But on the other hand, if it was due to negligence, and the person simply forgot about the appointment, and then remembered an hour before he was due to the doctor, and he realizes he can't go, and another added on to that, and the physician, and could have, had he been given disclosure within the proper 24, outside of the proper 24 hours, he could have filled that appointment with another patient. In other words, those two conditions have to be met. It could be that you're dealing in a locale where even if the guy had canceled 2 days before, it would have been unlikely for that doctor to be able to fill the appointment, because it's a certain kind of specialty that he only gets 1 or 2 patients a day anyway. So, but in a normal situation, let's say the physician is a GP, and he could easily fill up those appointments because he's backed up for days already anyway. In that situation, it seems the consensus of the poskim is that you have to pay the physician what is due to him, but not his full wage, not what he would charge for a standard appointment for the time that you would normally that he would normally allot for this patient, but you pay him like a poel batel. Now, the term poel batel is something that we'll see throughout the study of Choshen Mishpat, which is that if someone had allotted time for me to do a particular job, and then I cancel the job, and that person incurs a loss as a result because he can't fill that time up with working for somebody else, then I have to pay him like a poel batel. What is a poel batel? A guy who is paid to not work. In other words, how much would a person accept to, instead of doing his work, to be able to luxuriate and relax and not work? So that's what you have to pay the physician. So it's not, let's say, his normal fee for that half an hour or 20 minutes or whatever it would be, but it's less than that based on what he would be willing to accept to not have to work. Now, what is that amount? Shiur poel batel hainu chatzi scharo. The consensus of the poskim, we're not going to go through it all today, but it's something to get to at some point later. But it turns out that it's 50%, exactly half of what he would normally take. So let's say an appointment of this kind, a 20-minute allotment which the doctor sets aside for this patient, he would normally bill at $100. Okay, so the person wants to know halachically, what is my obligation to the physician? So you should give him $50, because basically he can't fill that appointment because it's too late, but he's entitled to some compensation. Okay, Dalit.
Rabbi, would that apply if, for example, a physician could do paperwork in that time or other things that he needs to do, and then that paperwork time could be filled later with other patients? Like, I mean, is there a way where there's an obligation for the physician to mitigate their loss and reduce the amount?
Well, again, you're getting into gray area. If he could rearrange his schedule, usually like a physician says, from 5 to 6 p.m. every single day, that's when I do my paperwork. So if this guy canceled the appointment and I can see patients from 5 to 6 and do my paperwork in that time, so then he is able to, he's not going to incur any financial loss. The bottom line is that if he genuinely says, I can't mitigate it in any way, I'm going to actually end up being out of pocket, or not really out of pocket, but not being able to fill that loss that you caused me. So then this would be the halacha.
Understood.
Dalit.
Thank you.
Sure. Dalit b'makom she'eno vadai shegaram hefsel l'rofe ein tzarich litein lo klum ubifrat heicha shehator nikva rak lebikur o tipul katzar. Now this sort of addresses your point, Paul. If it's not clear that the loss has been incurred, especially because many times it's a very short appointment and the doctor overbooks anyway, so then he doesn't have to pay. it has to be clear. The doctor has to be able to demonstrate, at least to himself, very clearly that there's a loss in order for him to be able to go over to the other Orthodox Jew and say, your cancellation genuinely caused me loss. But if it's unclear, it's a little bit, if it's ambiguous, so then the patient is pater. And finally, hey, kol hanal shayach gam bihizmin ulam lismachot v'achar kach bitel hazmanato. He says the same thing would all be true if, let's say, you book a hall, not just book an appointment for a physician, but let's say you book a wedding hall or some kind of simcha hall, and then you have to cancel the appointment. The same thing would be true, is that if it's done in such a way where it's too late for the booking hall, the hall to be able to book another customer, and they can demonstrate that because of your last minute cancellation, they lost money, you would have to pay them like a poel batel, which basically means that if they would have normally filled that hall and made X, you give them half of X if they can't fill it. But they have to really demonstrate that it was possible for them to fill it. But sometimes with a hall, the halacha will change. He says, as I've explained earlier in this responsum, he says, let's see, let me just see where it is. He says, sometimes, he says, let's see here. He says, Hakolafiros, right. B'davar ze shayach gam lebitul bitul ulam shehuzman l'simcha, di im lo haya ones kederach hanisbar tzarich l'shalom lo kapol batel. He says the same thing will be true if you are dealing with an owner of a hall, and if you cancel in such a way that it was not because of onus, but rather because you just decided to choose a different venue, and you canceled at the last minute. He says, but in that situation, it's not that you owe the guy half of X, but rather you should come up with some amount that is negotiated between the two parties. He says, but I also have to point out, he says, even if there was an onus, let's say the couple broke the engagement the day before the wedding, and you have to cancel the hall, okay? And this guy is going to lose, he lost an evening of revenue. Then he says, in that situation, remember we said when there's an onus, when it's a complete mishap that you had no way of preempting, he says, then you're putter from paying. But zen nemar rak le'inyan hefsed shel menias revach. That's only as far as being putter from paying him what he could have made. Aval im bal ha'ulam asa hachana likrata simcha v'hitriach atzmo. But if the hall owner actually had out-of-pocket expenses in preparing the hall for your simcha, and then you cancel at the last minute, azlo mibaya le'inyan hotzaat ha'kaspiyot shevadai chayav l'shalim l'mashiv shel al yidei zeh, then certainly you have to compensate him for the out-of-pocket expenses that he made in order to prepare for your simcha. But you'd also have to pay him for the labor expenses. In other words, if he, mamish, was schlepping all over town, you have to pay him for his labor as well, for the amount that he worked in order to prepare things for the simcha. That any work product that a person outputted, even if the employer has to cancel because of an onus, because of a total mishap, the balabayas is responsible to pay for that. He says because the worker is completely prepared to follow through, and you ended up canceling on him, so you have to pay him for the work. Ulam kol zeh kishlo asu shtar beinehim v'lo nasan demei kedima b'torei ravon. But all of this halacha that we stated about cancellation, and that if you cancel on a hall, and it's an onus, then you don't have to pay the full amount, and you should make some kind of negotiated settlement between the two of you, etc. He says that's all true when there was no contract signed and there was no down payment on the hall. He says, but in a situation where, which is generally done with booking halls, that you put down a down payment, he says the sages do give an example like this, that that many times it's implied that if a person says that if I go back on the deal, then my down payment is forgiven to you. And it really needs to be clarified more carefully that he's equivocating here, doesn't know exactly. If a person has a true mishap, the couple broke the engagement a day before the wedding, they called off the wedding. What is the right of the people who are paying for the hall in that situation? He says, are they entitled to get any percentage of their down payment back or not? He says, you have to look into what's the minhag medina, and if there's any differential, which is the custom of the locality, and is there any differentiation drawn in local convention between whether it was just a stam cancellation because we decided we wanted a different venue, or we forgot to notify the hall, or was there a true onus where at the last minute we can't do the wedding? Etc., etc., etc. Okay, so he doesn't really give us a full maskana on what the halacha would be when you have to cancel a hall that you've booked at the last minute. But basically, there is a general distinction in halacha between whether it was an onus or a pshia. An onus means it was done completely by accident, that it was out of your control, that you have to cancel at the last minute. There's more reason to exempt the person who needs to cancel. But if it's done through pshia, you're not forced to cancel, but you choose to cancel, or you cancel at the last minute without giving the person a chance to rebook, but you could have notified him further in advance. There, the halacha is less forgiving of the individual. In that situation, there's no question that you need to pay the hall owner something. It's not a complete half of what you normally would pay, but there should be some kind of negotiated settlement. If it's totally onus, so there you could actually, you could argue that you don't have to pay at all. However, that's only when there was no deposit put down and no contract signed. But if there was a deposit put down and you signed a piece of paper, so then you have to look at the convention of the state or of the province that you live in to find out what kind of accommodations are made for last minute cancellations that are either an act of God or totally beyond the control of the person making the contract. Okay. Well, someone had a question?
Yeah, Rabbi, what happens if it is beyond the possibility? In other words, position we're in right now with the COVID-19 virus, you rent a hall for a simcha, and really both sides are canceling it because it can't occur.
Right. It would seem, first of all, that's clearly an onus. It's beyond the control of the individual.
But at both sides, the venue as well.
Here, both sides are backing out. So he doesn't address that issue where both sides are incapable of carrying through on the contract. I don't know what I don't know what the Imrei Yaakov would say in such a situation, but it would certainly stand to reason that since both the hall and the person making the booking cannot carry through, then he should get his deposit back. I think this halacha is only being said where the hall owner can demonstrate that because of my cancellation, he's out of income. But you would have been out of income anyway, even if I
Right.
hadn't been booking. So why should you be entitled to keep the deposit? It doesn't really make any sense. And the only argument that could be made is if he already had put out of pocket
Right.
expenses, there should be some kind of negotiated settlement. Like we talked about a few days ago, when we talked about people who booked a Pesach program, and then and then all of the Pesach programs this year were canceled. There was definitely out of pocket loss for the people who were running the Pesach programs. And it would seem that there should be some kind of negotiated settlement, that you should get probably most of your deposit back, most of your down payment, but some of it should be allowed to be kept by the person running the program so that he doesn't get completely financially ruined as a result of this, of the pandemic. That would, yeah.
You also theoretically have a situation whereby, let's say you rent a hall for a Simcha 400, and now you're only allowed 50.
Yeah, the
So,
same. Yeah, I would
Same
think
kind of idea.
the same kind of idea would apply.
Rabbi, I have another question that I wanted to address here. What many people are dealing with is where you have situations right now with the pandemic where, let's say you rent an office in a building, and the building has no access, but you have a contract with the landlord. And I mean, this is what's happened to me in New York. The building sort of closed. I have my lease for my showroom, and they want the rent and everything like that, but I can't even access the building. So because they're claiming I have my lease, So isn't that a situation where there should be, to me as a tenant, some sort of payback, I guess, or forgiveness?
There definitely should be some kind of forgiveness, whether it's the full amount or whether it's a negotiated amount. There certainly should be some reduction of the rent since you can't access it. They're not even allowing you to access it. So I'm sure that this has been addressed by the state as far as what the law is. I'm sure if you just consulted with a lawyer, they would probably be able to tell you very simply what your rights as a tenant are. But I don't know. It probably varies from state to state. As far as what the halacha would be, it probably would end up being some kind of negotiated in between, where the landlord says, I'm as much at a loss as you are. So you probably would, in those kinds of situations, want to split the difference or something to that effect. Maybe have them maybe only pay half of the rent or something to that effect. But there certainly should be some kind of pishara, some kind of negotiated arrangement between the landlord and the tenant, I would think. Did you consult with the lawyer to find out what your rights are?
No, I'm about to, because that was actually my offer to the landlord, but not a Jewish landlord, and they didn't accept that. So I'll have to maybe go through a lawyer to see if there's more rights that I have to force the issue.
Right. Okay. All right, good. So what I'll do now is let's go back to the Imrei Yaakov that we were holding in, and let's start a new sif. We're up to sif Daled. We're talking about making a commitment to provide someone with a gift. And we had said that if you had committed to someone that you're going to give them a gift, if it's a matana mu'etes, you have to follow through. A small gift, you have to follow through. Otherwise, you're a mechusar amana. If it's a large gift, then you may not be considered a mechusar amana because there was no sense of reliance. And then in Sif Gimel, we said that that's only true if it's an individual committing to give a gift. But if it's a group of people, there's an assumption that they have the wherewithal, even on a large gift. So there too, there would be a mechusar amana if they back out of an oral commitment. And then he says as follows: L'chol zeh le'ashir. In Sif Daled, he writes, everything that we mentioned up above applies to a person of means, meaning that if the person that you're making the commitment to is a person of means, he's a contemporary, you're both middle-class Joes, And Ruvain says to Shimon, I'm going to give you a book, right? I'm going to drop off a book at your house. That was the example that we gave. There, if you back out of the deal, right, you're just a mechusar amana, you're a man acting in bad faith, but there's no legal recourse that Shimon has to force you to give him what he said he was going to give. Avol ha'omer litain la'ani, bein matana mu'etes, bein matana meruba, eino yachol lachzor bo min hadin. But if you make an oral commitment to a poor person, then you're entering the realm of Hilchos tzedakah. You made a commitment to give a person who is financially reliant on charity, and you made a commitment to give him something, so then halachically you're not allowed to back out. It's not just an issue of mechusar amana anymore. It's halachically you have to make good on your pledge. Mipnei shenasa kineder, because it's like you made an actual pledge. Vafilu gomar belibo litain, and even if you had made a mental commitment to give a gift of tzedakah, tzarich l'kayim machashato kemoshi yizboer behilchos tzedakah. You have to fulfill the thoughts in that you had mentally committed to, as will be explained in the laws of tzedakah. And that's the general introduction to this halacha, is that now we're getting into Yoredeya. This is not just a Choshen Mishpat issue, where it's a question of finance, but it's a question of when a person pledges something to tzedakah, he has now the status, this is now a ben adam lamakom issue. This is something now between you and God, that you've pledged something to do a mitzvah, and you're not allowed to back out on doing that mitzvah that involves the giving of your money. And therefore, the halacha is even more stringent in that regard. And this is what I want to examine more carefully. Tomorrow we'll go into the sources and discuss the source for this halacha. That when it comes to the Hilchos tzedakah, you have to follow through on your commitment, and we'll do that in Yirtzeh Hashem tomorrow. I'm going to have to stop now because I have to give the daf shortly, and I just want to chapa davening in the middle. So I hope everyone has a great day, and we'll see you a little bit later.
Take care.
Thank you.
Everybody.